Hey guys, welcome back. Today I'll be showing you guys how to scrape cash flow statements from bar chart. So on the site, I'm going to search for Apple. And here on the left hand side, I'm going to scroll down to where it says cash flow and then quarterly. So these are the 5 most recent cash flow statements for Apple. And if you click on next, it'll take you to the previous 5. And we see that here in our URL, it changes to page 2. So in this tutorial, I'm going to scrape the first page and also pages 2 through 10, and that'll get you about 50 quarters worth of cash flow statements for any public company. So if we go to our R script, all right, so here are some of the packages we're going to require. I'm going to set my ticker equal to Apple. Now in the script, I have 3 different functions. The first function will get you the latest 5 quarters or the 5 most recent quarters of the cash flow statements. The next function will get you pages 2 through 10 or approximately 45 quarters. And the last function will just calculate some ratios pertaining to the cash flow statements. So if we open up this first function, we start off by setting the URL and passing in our ticker. I'm going to read the HTML. I'm going to look for the table and convert it as a data frame. Within that HTML, I'm going to look for the value, and the value is pertaining to these values in the cash flow statement, more specifically looking for this text within this script. So once I return that text, I'm going to set value equal to the appropriate number of zeros. So let's run through an example. I'm going to run this block here. And if we take a look at DF, we have 38 rows and 6 columns. So now the next thing I want to do is move up this first row as a header, but I need to assign something for this very first row in the first column. So I'm going to set that equal to description. Now I can move up this first row as a column name or header. And if we take a look at DF, we see that we actually did move up this first row as a header. So now I'm going to go ahead and delete this first row. So that's what we will do in this very next line. Now the next block will get rid of any special characters such as N/A, $signs, or commas. And this will facilitate us with converting these columns into numerical variables. So that's what we will do by running this block. And if we take a look at DF, now we see that these are free from any commas or $signs. And the N/A has now turned into NA and R. So the next step is to paste the value since these are in thousands. So I'm going to add 3 zeros wherever we see a numerical variable. And I'm going to do that by running this for. So for each of the columns, I'm going to check whether the value is numeric or not. If it is numeric, I'm going to go ahead and add those 3 zeros. Otherwise, it'll just return an NA. So I'm going to go ahead and run this block. So if we take a look at our data frame, so now these 5 columns are numeric. So now I'm going to go ahead and get rid of these NA rows, but I don't want to get rid of all the NA rows since some of these rows actually have values. So my logic was to just delete any rows that have 5 NAs. So in the following line, I'll look for any rows that have 5 NAs, and I'm going to go ahead and drop those rows. So if we run that line and take a look at our data frame, it becomes much more condensed. Now we have 29 rows and 6 columns, and we get to keep those rows that have actual values in them. So the next step is to move this very first column as row names, but we cannot have any duplicate row names. So I'm going to go ahead and change this operating cash flow since it does appear twice. So I'm going to go ahead and rename it. I'm going to rename it to operating CF. Now we can go ahead and add that first column as row names. And if we take a look at our data frame, it did format the column names here, but that shouldn't be an issue going forward. And the main reason I'm doing this is because when calling the rest of the pages out of the cash flow statements, we may have altering number of rows, and sometimes we may have extra variables that we want to incorporate. So when I call the rest and I want to merge these 2 data frames together, it shouldn't be an issue since I'll just be merging by row names. So this is our final product. I'm going to go ahead and minimize this function. I'm going to go ahead and run it. I'm going to test this function out and assign it to page 1. So we take a look at page 1. We do see 29 rows and 5 different columns. So that's if you just want to get this first page or just the most recent. But now let's take a look at our next function. So our next function will get the rest of the pages, and I do that by formatting this URL. So I'm passing in the ticker, and for the report page, I'm going to do pages 2 through 10. So that'll create my URLs. I will then pass in all the URLs as a list and use lapply to read in the HTML. Between each request, I'm going to set the script to sleep for 3 seconds to avoid bar chart banning our IP. So I'll go ahead and return these HTMLs and save them as PG. After I read in the HTMLs, I'll just exclude any empty pages. And this may be useful for relatively new companies who don't have that much data. So after I exclude those empty pages, I'm going to go ahead and extract the tables. So for this block, it'll be essentially the first function where I'm just looking for the table, extracting the value, and do a bit of formatting. So I'll do that for each of the HTMLs or each of the pages. After I get my tables, I will go ahead and merge these by row names. So I'm going to start off by merging this very first page or page 2 with the second or page 3 into DF. I'm going to go ahead and drop that very first column and turn them into row names. And then I'll use a for loop to get the rest of the pages. So it'll be 3 to 10. And I'll repeat the process by continuously merging DF2 with the following page and then turning that very first column into row names. So everything will get saved as DF2. And then finally just return DF2. So I'll go ahead and minimize this function. I'll go ahead and run it. And then I'll go ahead and test this function out. So this may take some time to run, and that's just because I have that system sleep for 3 seconds between requests. But after that's done running, I'll go ahead and merge our first page with the rest of the pages into CF. And then again, I'll go ahead and drop that very first column and turn it into row names. So if we run that line and then we take a look at CF, we do see that we have 30 rows instead of the 29 rows in page 1. And we do see we have data from June 2021 all the way to March of 2009. So a total of 50 quarters for Apple. So now let's take a look at our very next function, which will calculate the ratios. So we're passing in our cash flow statements along with the ticker. So the very first thing I want to add is the stock price, and I do that by requesting data from Yahoo Finance or get symbols. I'm going to turn that data into quarterly data, and then I'm just going to extract the closing price, and I'm going to assign that to temp. Since this is quarterly data, the timestamps are in year quarter format. So I'm going to go ahead and reformat the column names in my cash flow statement so that they match up. I'm going to assign them in reverse order since that's the order of my cash flow statements. And then to actually get the data or the stock prices, I'm going to assign an empty data frame. And for each of the columns, I'm going to go ahead and convert each of the column names into this year quarter format. And then I'm going to try to match up that timestamp with our data. If we don't have a stock price for that particular quarter, I'm going to assign that to NA. And I'm going to keep looping until all columns are exhausted, while also column binding or C binding each of my stock prices into this variable called 2R. So once that is done running, I will convert it as a data frame to keep things consistent. So I'll go ahead and assign a row name to this data for the stock price, and then also change my column names so that they match up with our cash flow statements. So one of the two ratios I want to include in this function is the operating cash flow over total cash flow. So that'll be operating cash flow divided by operating, financing, and investing cash flow. I'll round that to 4 decimal places and convert it as a data frame. And then I'll go ahead and drop that very first column and change it into a row name, and also format the column names to match up with my cash flow statements. And then finally, our last ratio will be the financing cash flow over the operating cash flow. And then again, I'm just going to convert that into a data frame, drop the very first column into a row name, and format the column names in this data frame to match up with our cash flow statements. Finally, just R-bind our stock prices and our two ratios and return that data frame. So if we go ahead and minimize this function, I'll go ahead and run it. I'll go ahead and test this function. And if we take a look at ratios, we see that we have 3 rows and 50 columns. So now I'll go ahead and row bind my cash flow statement with the ratios. And if we take a look at CF, we now have 3 additional rows. And if you scroll all the way to the bottom, we do see our stock price and our 2 ratios. So if we go back to our script, I do have an option set if you want to export this data frame as a CSV file into your desktop, if you do want to look at this data in Excel or in a spreadsheet. And I also have the option to transpose the table and save that as a CSV file. So if we look at that transpose table, it essentially just flipped the rows with the columns. And this may be useful if you want to aggregate the quarters into years. It'll be much more easier to work with if you're dealing with this data in Excel or in a spreadsheet. So this concludes the video, guys. Our next step is to scrape the balance sheet, and once we have those 3 financial statements, we can calculate ratios for any of the companies. So stay tuned for that. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.